So I worked for many years as a professional cinematographer. And I was very fortunate to hook up with people who did a lot of travel, and I eventually shot projects in 30 different countries and 40 different states. And eventually things got, we got pretty experienced at it. We got one trip I want to tell you about in particular was to China. It was many of our trips. It seemed year after year we were sent places in the coldest months of the year. Another a winter trip to Detroit. Have you ever been to Detroit in the winter? Winter trip to London. You ever been to London in the winter? Very cold. But one time we got sent to China in the spring, and there's my spring tie-in. And that's it. Our client for this job was Philips Medical Systems, who we refer to as PMS. Because they were kind of a pain. But we've done a lot of work for them, and they were sending us to China. We had a shoot for us documenting the work of a prominent radiologist in Shenyang, China, which is in the northeast corner of the country, about 150 miles from North Korea, in the area formerly known as Manchuria. Now, PMS wanted us to go there and document the work of this radiologist in diagnostic imaging. But official China was standing in our way. The biggest hurdle was just getting out of town, getting a visa to go shoot in China. We reported to the the visa office at the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, and we were applying for business visas. This was my fourth trip to China. We'd all been there a bunch. We had local people over there. We were always told, make sure you get a business visa. Don't get a journalist visa, because the government is very suspicious of journalists. They will follow you around. They will make life very difficult. Get a business visa. So we reported to the visa office, not really sure why they were giving it such a hard time. We weren't doing a subversive film. The government clearly was suspicious of people who might want to show unflattering aspects of the Chinese regime. But that's not, we were talking about the wonders of CAT scan and imaging, an X-ray. It had nothing to do with that. The visa clerk was in a corridor behind a glass wall with a little slot. We passed our documents through to her. And even though this was long before the pandemic, she wore surgical gloves and a mask, even behind the glass. And she picked up our documents, and she would examine them, and she would ask questions. And then she would run to the back of the office, and we could see her conferring with people we assumed were her bosses. And the bosses would point at things, and they'd shake their heads, and they'd point at things, and they'd point and shake. We didn't know what it was, but we know shaking was not good. And she would come back to us. She came back to us, and she wanted more paperwork. And we had a list of all our equipment, because we were traveling as a crew with all our video and audio equipment with us. We wanted to bring it all in. And we'd been there before. I'd been there 9 months before with almost exactly the same crew and camera package. And we had no problems at all. This time they were making it very hard, lots of questions. They sent us away to get more paperwork because we had an invitation from the prominent radiologist. We had an invitation from PMS, but we didn't have an invitation from the hospital. So we had to get a documented invitation. Came back, and eventually we got our business visas. And we felt, wow, terrific. We felt like we'd conquered the whole Chinese regime. We defeated the panda. Things were looking up. But this is when we discovered that things were not the way they seemed. We landed in Beijing, where we had 3 hours to get all of our equipment off the carousel, clear customs, recheck it, and make a flight to Shenyang, which was about a 90-minute flight. We got all our gear, and that's when official China barred the door. A very, very young man in a very fancy, shiny, military-style uniform was telling us that we couldn't come in. And he's looking at our paperwork, and he's shaking his head and pointing, and shaking his head and pointing. And he didn't speak English. We didn't speak Chinese, but we weren't rookies. We'd done this before. And we had a local producer, a fixer, a guy named Andrew Leung, a wonderful fellow who'd worked with us in Singapore and Hong Kong and Japan and China before. And Andrew somehow got into the customs hall, which is very rare to get in backwards, coming from the mainland there. And he started to get involved, and he talked to the very young man in the very shiny uniform. I can see them pointing and shaking and pointing and shaking. And we're getting a little worried now. And then Andrew comes and talks to us, and he says, "This guy says you can't bring in your equipment." We said, "Why? Why not? Why not?" He said, "Well, this guy says the problem is you have business visas. Business visas are only good for meetings. You need journalist visas." We said, "Andrew, you've always told us." He said, I know. Let me go talk to him." So he goes back and talks to the very young man, and they're pointing and shaking and pointing and shaking. And eventually, somebody smiles a little bit, and somebody else smiles. And then there's a little nod. Andrew comes back to us. He says, okay, I've worked it all out. This guy will let you bring in all of your equipment." We said, "That's great." He said, "Except for one thing. You can't bring in your camera body." I said, "Andrew, we have to shoot in Shenyang tomorrow. What are we can't leave our camera here." He said, "Well, you can bring in everything else, but not the camera body." So we took our $65,000 Panasonic 3700 professional high definition camera, and my engineer Jim, who actually owned the camera and all the gear, put it in its padded bag. I took a little luggage lock, one of these flimsy things you can break with your fingers, fastened it together. Jim handed it to the very young man, who nodded, kind of ceremonially. He put it in a closet, locked it, and gave Jim a receipt, handwritten in Chinese, on very translucent, shiny paper. And Jim kind of stuck it in his pocket, and we went running for the plane. I said, "Andrew, how are we gonna?" He said, "Don't worry." He just got off the phone with a professional camera assistant there in Beijing, and that guy was on his way to a rental company, and he was going to rent a Panasonic 3700, which, even though it was the most expensive item on the list, was also the easiest one to replace. So this guy rented the camera body that we'd just given up and made the midnight flight and met us on the set the following morning at 6 a.m. Very, very tired. So we went running for the plane. We made the plane. Delighted that we had a solution and that we'd gotten in the country and we had most of our stuff. We still had our lenses. We still had our video monitors. We still had our mics and our tripod and all of our controller units. So all we needed was the camera body. And we got to Shenyang, which was kind of a bland industrial city of about 4 million people. And we went to, we checked into our hotel. We were staying at the Kempinski. Now the Kempinski is a German hotel chain. And we were tired right off the plane. We'd been traveling all day. Nobody wanted to leave the hotel to go out for dinner. So we decided we would eat in the hotel. And we went to explore the main restaurant on the ground floor. It was a German hotel. The main restaurant was a Bavarian beer hall called the Polaner Brauhaus. And we were kind of tempted, and then David, our director, said, "Listen, guys, this is my first night in China ever. I'm not going to eat German food." Okay. So we went in search of another restaurant, second floor, the Golden Dragon. We had a mediocre dinner there. It was kind of glutinous and bony and much too heavily salted, but it was definitely Chinese food. So everybody was happy. The next day we went off to the hospital. We met with a prominent radiologist. We shot his interview. We filmed some other material. We met a couple of patients. We had a really successful day shooting. And in the middle of the day for lunch, Andrew took us and we had hired a bunch of 5 or 6 Chinese lighting guys. We went to a lovely restaurant. He got us a private room. Andrew ordered about a dozen dishes and laid out a buffet, and we had a lot of terrific Chinese food that day. So that evening, when we got back to the hotel, we were feeling really good because we'd gotten so much done that day. We'd had a lot of Chinese food already, and the idea of German beer sounded really good. So we went to the Polaner Brauhaus, and it was an enormous room. It probably would have seated 300 people. In the back was Shenyang's only microbrewery. The walls were dark wood. There was a lot of shiny brass fittings on the bar and other places. One whole wall had private beer steins that belonged to different regulars who kept their beer mugs there with their names on them. It was a great scene, and we sat down, got some beer, got some food. About halfway across the room, we could see there was a small stage, and there was a band playing on the stage, and they were all wearing tight green sequin pants. Out front was a guy and two girls playing guitars and dancing and singing. In the back were two more girls, one playing keyboards and one playing the bass. And they were playing American rock from the 80s and 90s, which is what you hear everywhere. I mean, you go to Shenyang, China, you don't hear Chinese music unless you seek it out. And the volume on the music was strategically set so the rhythm was loud enough that you really made you want to tap your foot, but the vocals were quiet enough that you could still actually talk and hear each other. So we ate our food quickly. We were tired, still only one night off the plane, and we went to bed. And just as we were leaving, we noticed that the band took a break and they were starting to walk around from table to table greeting people. So the next day we went back to the hospital. We filmed the prominent radiologist's assistant. We interviewed another patient. We did filmed some other material that we needed. And all of a sudden, we were done. We had actually finished our shoot a whole day early. So when we got back to the hotel, we were really happy and wanted to party. We went back to the beer hall. And we ordered farmer salads and lots of different kinds of beer, and little flights with lots of things to taste. And we settled back, and this time we sat a lot closer to the band. And we were watching them, and one of the guys said he thought they might be Thai. But I'd spent a lot of time in Manila. I was pretty sure they were Filipinos. And they eventually took a break. And they came in to talk to us. We had a nice chat with them. They didn't look anywhere near as cute or young as when we got up close to them as they did when they were up on stage. They were, in fact, from the Philippines, and they'd been playing at the Kempinski for 8 months, 2 or 3 sets a day, all the same songs over and over. They've been playing there for 8 months, and a gig that might last a year. And I wonder if the idea of going abroad to play for a year had seemed really exciting when they first got the job, and only to end up in a place that had almost no culture, a very gray city, as I mentioned. But I had enough musicians in my family to know that a year-long gig, no matter what it is nothing to sneeze at. So they asked where we were from, and we told them San Francisco, and they oohed and ahed because they knew it was a beautiful place. And one of the girls said that they would dedicate a song to us when they went back up, because they knew that we must be homesick. And I thought, we just left home on Sunday. We're going home in 2 days. They've been here 8 months. They don't get to leave for at least another half a year. So we were curious to see what was going to happen. And eventually they went back up on stage, and they announced that they were going to dedicate a song to us. And I began to wonder, what song could this be? I mean, would they even know that Otis Redding was sitting on the dock of the bay in San Francisco? I mean, I could hear Eric Clapton's sweet licks. I got the blues from a baby down by San Francisco Bay. Hey, hey, hey. I could see Clark Gable and Jeanette MacDonald marching after the 1906 earthquake thing. San Francisco, open your golden gate. And there was that weird song by Eric Burdon and the Animals. Walls move, minds do too. On a warm San Francisco night. Warm San Francisco night. And then I knew exactly what song it had to be. The song my beloved Giants play after every home victory. Everybody's favorite San Francisco anthem, as usually sung by an Italian American from Astoria, Queens. I left my heart in San Francisco, high on a hill, it calls to me to be where little cable cars climb halfway to the stars. I mean, that had to be it, right? Wrong! Which is how it happened that a Filipino band in a Bavarian beer hall in a German hotel in a Chinese city in the area formerly known as Manchuria dedicated a song to their new BFFs from San Francisco, one of whom was actually born in Bombay and one in Brooklyn. A familiar toe-tapping rhythm started. First one guitar, then another guitar, then the bass, then keyboards, and then the lyrics in fine redneck rock, Lynyrd Skynyrd harmonies. Sweet home Alabama, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home Alabama, I'll be coming back to you. A for effort and sweetness, but D for geography. Thank you.